We got scissors for you. We know. We knew. And then we were looking at, we listened to the videos and the whole first 10 minutes of it. Yeah.
They all have different opinions.
Really?
One wasn't real chocolate.
Yeah. You're a fan? The one driving? Yeah, I wasn't a fan of us separating, but there also just wasn't a lot of work on the section that we did. They went ahead and started trimming before the event, so and it's fine. It's gonna grow back, so it'll just last longer. We'll have to go back and maintain in less amount of time. I want an animal.
Oh, nice. All right. Yeah.
They're a good outfit. They're a good organization. They do a lot of cool work.
We were just passing by. How's it going? Great. What's happening here? This is just incredible.
You guys get started in just about a minute if you want to start finding a seat. Oh, totally free. Grab whatever you want. Yeah, and there's some water and like filtered water. Yeah. I want this big bite. You need to take it home. Will you welcome them?
I think we're going to get started.
Welcome everyone. Welcome to Conservation Conversations. Please don't be afraid to sit in the front. Space. Everybody grab food.
I have like talking reminders in my hands. These apples and all the fruit that was donated is from Jimbo's Escondido. So big shout out Jimbo's. Hopefully they'll sponsor for 2026 too. Lovely volunteer, Rich brought limes. I see too many limes back there, so everybody needs to walk out with a couple, okay? Everybody in here has access to a flyer that has a promo code to come free to our second annual Outdoor Education Elevated event, which is a fall family festival, perfect for kiddos, perfect for any age though as well. Nature inspired activities, mountain lion presentation from a expert from the Cardboard Project at UC Davis. I'm super stoked for it. I hope that you guys can come. Tickets were $20 and $15 for kiddos, but now you can come free due to all the donations, and we raised the amount of money we wanted to, so we're super grateful, and I hope you guys can come. Next thing is the Conservancy's. So I should tell you guys a little bit more about the Escondido Creek Conservancy. We host this event in partnership with the Elfin Forest Recreation Reserve here. This interpretive center that you're sitting in was built in 2009. It is just such a beautiful space, and I hope you guys can come back and visit it. Musical performances on the first Sunday of the month from Triad. Excellent nature-inspired musical. I'm looking at John right here. He's half of the band. Yes, I hope you guys can come back. I was beginning to talk about this flyer, sorry. Our board president, Miss Lisa, was diagnosed with leukemia. If you guys are interested in learning more about how to donate blood, stuff like that, just stuff to learn how to help, don't be shy. We have some flyers in the back just to learn more about her cause. She's an amazing lady. Yeah, and so again, we're the Escondido Creek Conservancy. We host this event with the Elfin Forest. We're an environmental nonprofit founded in 1991. We've had this event series going on for a while. Its previous iteration was called Tech Talks, that's our acronym. But yeah, it's just my pleasure to find speakers, local speakers, bringing lots of local knowledge. This month we have Rick Botta from the San Diego tracking team. I'm super excited, and I hope you guys can continue to come back and support these events. January, April, July, and October is when they occur, and they're always free. We just encourage you guys to donate. We have a donation bin right back there, and also at the trailhead. Both those donation bins just go to improving the educational offerings inside this interpretive center. So please don't be shy. Come back. Bring your kiddos on the weekends. Come back yourself. Yeah. So thank you, Rick, and yeah.
Thank you. I'll tell you a little bit about me in a second, but first I'd like to say thank you to the Escondido Creek Conservancy for having us here tonight. A second thank you for bringing food, because the worst thing you want to be as a presenter is the person that's standing between the audience and their food. The other thing I'm going to do is make sure I get the buttons right, because you don't want to hit the wrong button and end up on the last slide that says you're done, because everybody starts sleeping. And you don't want to hit the button that turns the lights out, because everybody gets up and starts sleeping. And you're laughing about turning out the lights. It's happened to me at a presentation we were doing out at Anza, but it was sheer coincidence. I switched slides and the power to the building. Okay. So, all right. So the bulk of the presentation tonight is on that second bullet about how to identify and interpret wildlife tracking sound. And what we're focusing on here is just mammals. So we're not going to get, and sort of those medium to large size mammals. So nothing about bird tracks. So if you're a bird person, we do have stuff about birds. Not here. And we're not going to get to the real small stuff like how do you tell a wood rat from a blackbird, that kind of thing. So higher level basis. So the bulk of the presentation is that. And then depending upon how much time we have after that, I'll do a quick run through about how the San Diego tracking team uses the tracking sign data that we collect to visualize it and make observations and analysis for things that we can give to the people that we are doing monitoring of the properties to, so they can make informed decisions. So, quick background on me before we get into the presentation is I am one of the founding members of the Escondido Creek. I'm a former president of the tracking team and currently just now, as far as leadership kind of stuff, I'm just under the but I still do a lot of wildlife actions, mostly using trail cameras, working with a number of different land managers. I've been tracking since 1990. I went back and looked this up. 1993 is when I started tracking, and I've been tracking continually ever since. But it started from just a bunch of people in Penasquitos Canyon that wanted to learn about tracking as a way to identify what kind of mammals we're using to preserve and going up into the Delmar Basin places. Because a lot of people were doing bird surveys, and they were doing small mammal surveys, they were doing stream surveys, but nobody had any idea about what mammals were there, what routes they were taking, where the connectivities were. And that's when all the development was going on. So over the years, just through going to different tracking classes, doing tracking certifications, on and on and on. I got to the point where, or the tracking team got to a point where we could do a lot more with other conservation organizations in terms of help to provide them data. And so that's kind of what I'm doing. So who are we? What do we do? We were formed in 2001, but our background goes back to the mid-90s when we started as part of the Friends of Los Conocidos Canyon Preserve. And we did almost exclusively any tracking sign collection we were doing. It was all in Penasquitos Canyon and Lopez Canyon. And we got so carried away that every single trail and any place that had dirt, we were collecting data. It got to the point where we were growing and sort of downsized there, but we spread out to other places. And then in 2003, we became a nonprofit, and we are 100% all volunteers. We have no paid staff. Our income comes from donations and donations that people make for some of our classes. I'll let you read the mission statement before we go on. Okay, so what do we do? So the primary thing we do is wildlife data collection and monitoring. And the monitoring really means we collect data in the same areas long-term. So we have this data that we can look at trends seasonally, yearly. And we do that through our tracking sign surveys, but we also do it through camera monitoring. And in some locations we do both the tracking sign surveys and camera monitors. And then in other places, it's just exclusively cameras. We have a free track and sign training class for the public. It's free to come to for anybody that wants to spend a half a day learning the basics of tracking. And then if they would like, they can sign up to go on what we call a transect or a search and be part of the team that goes out. We also have a series of tracker naturalist classes that are a little bit more involved. Three-part series, an evening presentation, and then a field day. We offer those twice a year. We do public outreach events like this. We run presentations for people. or having a booth at an event that an organization is sponsoring. We've done a couple of larger projects. The first one was back in the early 2000s. We worked with Conservation Biology Institute, who was doing an assessment of all the linkages across San Diego County. We had a part in that, doing track and sign data collection that got merged into the camera stuff and other monitoring that they were doing. And another one that we finished a few years ago was a one-year project with the City of San Diego Park and Rec to do an evaluation of the connectivity from Black Mountain open space kind of down under the Carmel Valley Road and then out into the Escondido Creek area on the properties that they own. We host track and sign and trailing certifications. We don't do the certifications. There is an organization across North America that has some of the best trackers and naturalists in the country that do those certifications. So we sponsor that, and people can come, they can get, number one, it's just a great hands-on thing, they're certified. But the best thing is we have fun with it. It's not really like work. It's more like you're out playing in the dirt. Okay, so this is called relationships. That's kind of a misnomer. This chart just lists who are the people that we are currently doing monitoring, either track and sign collection or camera data on their property. There's the other kind of relationship where we work and do things with other organizations, but we don't necessarily do data collection. So, for instance, a relationship with the Escondido Creek Conservancy that, what was that, 3-4 years ago? Like 3 years ago. Escondido Creek Conservancy, San Diego Habitat Conservancy, Levenhain, and I think Center for Natural Lands Management. We all got together and we provided a half-day, I think, tracking class on one of Escondido Creek Conservancy's properties. So we have those kind of relationships with people where we do things with each other. Okay, so we're going to go on a virtual hike. And the hike can be, in your brain, the hike can be any place you want it to be. And you just kind of visualize this. And when we get done, there's a reason we did this hike. So this is a very, very large open space. But where your mind is, it can be the trails around here, it can be the trails keep the preserve, trails stand wherever you want. But imagine yourself, get out of your car, the trailhead, and you start walking. You pass this mostly buckwheat habitat. The trail goes right through it. You're walking along, you're looking at the buckwheat, you see some flowering plants that are popping up in between those things. And you hear some quail. And then, all of a sudden, you spook the covey of quail. Flies across the trail right in front of you. So you keep going a little bit farther, and then you start climbing up the ridgeline. And suddenly, now you're under a bunch of oaks. And you look off to one side, and you see this Fina pepla up on the tree, just hanging out. Go a little bit farther, and you spook an owl that comes out of an oak tree on the other side, flies right in front of your face. You keep going up, and you see different plants, and you see, looking down over the valley, you see red-tailed hawk fly over. And finally, it's time to go. You turn around, you go back to your car, and you think, wow, that was a great hike. I saw all these different plants. I saw a bunch of birds. But I didn't see any mammals. And if you did see any mammals, it was most likely that you maybe heard the ground squirrel chirping, or you saw a cottontail run across the trail, or you looked down and you spooked a gopher that was starting to come out of its hole. But you go, where's the deer, where's the coyote? Well, the reason that it's often the case that you don't see those bigger mammals is because a lot of them are secretive, and some are nocturnal, so they only move at night or early morning. And there's disturbances during the day that keep you awake. So if you are in a place and you don't see an animal, well, how do you know it's there? How do you know it exists there? If you don't know it exists, then you don't know anything about potentially what's using that habitat. So how do you make informed decisions about how to conserve certain areas? And so one way to do that is through animal track and sign. So and it doesn't matter if you're doing track and sign collection, camera collection, plant surveys, bird surveys, the information that you have is the thing that enables you to do conservation. So a caveat before I go on, many of these photos in here came from trail cameras that I have up. Some of them, the animal's kind of close, so the photos is blurry. So that was the animal's fault and not mine. So what is tracking? At the basic of tracking, it's just identification and interpretation of wildlife tracking. So that's the simple definition. And through that is a way to start to understand animal behavior. And in essence, because to understand animal behavior, you have to factor in the species and the habitat and a lot of other aspects of the ecosystem that it's in. So really, tracking is field ecology. So if you are somebody that considers yourself a naturalist, but your focus is on plants, or your focus is on birds, then really tracking is just another set of natural skills for you to broaden your knowledge. It's also, and if you're not focused like we are on data collection and dissemination of information, learning tracking is something you can do with your family. You can go out with your friends and just have fun. And where else, other than maybe at work, where else can you go as an adult and it's okay to get dirty? Okay, so tracks and track patterns. So a track, by definition, is just the impression that's left in the substrate when an animal moves through. And that substrate can be dirt, sand, mud, leaf litter, whatever is covering it. Track patterns are related are tracks that are related because they're front and rear feet from the same animal that form a pattern. And those patterns are associated with the gait that an animal moves. And we'll talk about gaits and track patterns later on. When we talk about wildlife sign, that's any other thing that you see that's related to a species other than the track. So it can be chews, browse, rubs, furs, kill sites, scat. In the case of rabbits, a very distinct urine pattern that you can tell where rabbits come. Skulls, dentures, and bones, and the whole science, it's probably an art too, of being able to look at a skull, a lower denture, bone pieces, and identify where did those bones or skull, who's that? There's different types of scrapes, and again, heads and legs, and so all kinds of other things. So as you start going from track identification, which is just simply who made the track or who left this sign, and you start adding in track patterns associating with them with dates, and then factoring other observations you see that are related to those tracks and the signs. Then you start with adding questions into your mind. You start kind of building a story about what this animal may have been doing or most likely been they were doing. So really the identification part, like I said, is just a who. Track and sign interpretation says what was the animal doing, and to some degree why was it doing it. Track aging, and when we do track aging, we're not looking at, well, we think this track was made at 2:23 a.m. this morning. We're looking for relative aging. So was this track made early this morning? Like after the morning dew? Or when was this made relative to this other track, before or after? So coming up with track aging gives you an idea of how long ago that animal flew. And then trailing, which we're not going to cover here, is just where was this animal going? Okay. So the first part of this is just what do we need to know to be able to say who made this track? So the first thing is looking for differences in the ways tracks present themselves on the ground. And that's largely dependent upon whether the animal is plantigrade, digigrade, say that 3 times, or ungulagrade. So plantigrade are animals where the bone structure of their foot is supported by that entire bone structure, the toes and the bones of the feet. So those are going to be things like ground squirrels, raccoons, bears, things like that. The digigrade are more up on their toes. That's dogs, cats. And then ungulagrade are ungulus, so they're the toed animals, 2 or 3 toed. So around here it would be mule deer and pickle sheep, at least for the non-domestic stuff. So when we looked at identification of a track, so look the diagram that's on your right, and this is really scientific stuff, so pay attention. So we have toes, which are basically the difference. The ones that are on the outside are cleverly called the outside toes. The ones that are on the inside are cleverly called the inside toes. We have heel pads, and heel pads can be either a singular heel pad, they can have different number of lobes on the top and the bottom, or they can be individual pads. We'll see some examples of that later on. Typically, in between the toes, foot comes down and the soil pushes up through them. Those are what's called ridges. then you may or may not see claws. Some animals have retractable claws that typically don't show. Other species like dog families have non-retractable toes that may or may not all show. So things to get started from a tracking standpoint is pay attention to what the shape of the track is. And that's just if you drew kind of started the back of the lobes of the heel pad, come up around the outside of the outer toes, across the inner toes, and then around the other outer toes, you get a shape. So that shape can either be rectangle or oval, which means the track is generally longer than it is wide. It can be more roundish, which means the length and the width of the track are roughly the same, but usually the width is a little bit more, but it'll still have that roundish. Some tracks, like skunks, almost have a blocky look. So the shape can help you identify what's what. Size of the track, is it really small, is it really big, can help you narrow down. The number and the shape of toes, because not all four-toed animals have the same shape of toes, and the shape of toes on the front and the hind foot of a species are not exactly the same. Mountain lions, bobcats would be one thing. Configuration of the heel pad, the number of toes or the number of lobes is usually the thing that we look at. But there's other things you can look at, like where's the widest part of the heel. That will tell you whether it's a right foot or a left foot on someone. And then, is this track more symmetrical or more asymmetrical? So what I mean by symmetrical is, if you look at our hands, and if you could fold your hand where the center line, the center of the fold is right through the middle of your middle finger, our hands are not symmetrical. If you could, that would be symmetrical. So if the left half of a print or your hand is roughly the same as, I start with the left hand, so the left part of your of a track looks roughly the same as the other side of the track, we say that is more symmetrical. And if not, then it's more asymmetrical. Okay. So this, just real quick, most tracking books and trackers will refer to toes by number. So your number one toe is always the inside. So it will always point to the inside of the track at the end of the move, kind of like us. Same kind of thing. So you can see the measure, where to measure. The caution on this one is this example represents how some trackers and some tracker books measure track. They go from the back of the heel pad to the front of the toes, to the claw marks on the two toes. I don't do that. A lot of trackers that I know, they don't do that because, not that that's wrong, it's just claws are variable. So if you leave the claws out and you measure the track, if you don't see the claws on, let's say, coyote track, and you measure it, then you can compare it with something that has tracks because you didn't measure the track. Okay. So, first set of families we're going to look at are the canines and the felines. So that's dogs and cats. And San Diego County in California, generally what we have in terms of canines are going to be coyotes, gray foxes, kit foxes if you're in the desert. And then you've got the island foxes that are offshore. But those are the ones, and then domestic dogs are generally what you would have and what we have here. In terms of the felines, it's bobcat, mountain lion, and domestic or feral cats. One thing, so there are things that are common between the cats or canines and felines. One is they have 4 toes in the front, 4 on the back. And they have a single heel pad. Doesn't look the same, but those are kind of general similarities. So when we look at canine tracks, we've got domestic dog, coyote, and green fox. So you can see, if you look at, does this have a pointer on it by any chance?
Maybe that top button?
It does, but it doesn't reflect off the TV screen.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
We won't do that. So if you look at the coyote, you can see the general, almost triangular shape of that heel pad, solid heel pad, single lobe at the top, and little lobes at the end. But that's a fairly symmetrical track. That the right side of that track, the left side of the track look the same. So it's symmetrical. You can also, visually or using sticks, you can put an X pattern through that. And that X does not intersect the toes or any part of the body. And usually where that X is on coyotes and even domestic dogs, there's a little mound of dirt that just comes up. Gray foxes are much smaller. They have much more of an open space, so you don't necessarily see that X pattern. Their heels are often just a little sliver, the back, but much smaller. Domestic dogs, in general, are larger than the coyote, and definitely larger than the gray fox. But that depends on the breed of the dog. But generally, look how compact the coyote track is. Toes are pretty tight to each other. Inner toes are facing a little bit forward. And you look at domestic dogs, their toes tend to be split, outer toes splayed out more. They, more often than not, will, coyotes, if you see claw marks, usually it's on the inner 2 toes, not so much on the outer 2 toes. Most domestic dogs will show inner 2 toe claw marks, as well as some of the outside claw marks. But coyotes, when you see the claw marks, they're much sharper, much thinner impression, where look how big and blunt those claw marks are on the domestic dog. Domestic dog scat, or any kind of, I should say, coyote scat, tends to be long and kind of twisted, often has a tapered end. It can be dark like that. Usually when I see the real dark stuff, it's after its first digestion of meat is the best I can come up with. But sometimes you'll see something like that and it's all grass. It's vegetation, other vegetation, it's fruits from whatever's growing or whatever out in the desert. I've seen it where it's nothing but manzanita seeds. And then fox scat is similar, but it's a lot, it tends to be more dark most of the time. It's a lot thinner, twisted ends, and for some reason, it's not always, but foxes like to leave their skin on top of stuff, like rocks. We're driving up Sunrise Highway, and they've got these little dot things on the edge of the road. And we just drove by, the person that wasn't driving was looking out the window. And it was just this series of blob to scat, fox cat, on those things. I guess they like views or something. Okay, so now, felines. So felines are much different. Number one, I think the best one to look at would be the mountain lion in the middle. But whereas dogs tend to be a little bit more of a symmetrical track, mountain lions are asymmetrical. So as an example, take your hand, now fold your thumb. Now, if you're using your right hand, and this is your number one finger, your number three finger is longer than the other ones. Now do it to the other hand. Same thing, but it's just kind of reversed. So, just like we can tell this is our right hand, and this is our left hand by where that leading or asymmetrical toe is. Same thing with bobcats. So you can look at, and so the number one toe on canines and felines is basically up here. So kind of go 2, 3, 4. But if you look at, put your hand up there, and then put your hand like that, and say, okay, what does that look like? A right or a left?
All right.
Yeah. So that is a right mountain lion foot. The other thing that with lions and bobcats and even domestic, you can't do that X thing like you can with the canine. The orientation of the outer two toes and the inner two toes tends to be, if you kind of do the line step, it's almost like an H shape. The other thing is, yeah, it's a single heel pad, but look at the lobing. You can see it in both of those mountain lion ones, a little bit better than the bobcat one. Is they've got 3 lobes at the bottom of the heel pad, and then 2 lobes at the top. So that's a way you can tell those apart. So here's a comparison just in terms of how the foot look between a domestic dog and a mountain lion. So the sizes are obviously different, but the photos are still the same. You can see the kind of the 2 lobing at the bottom of the dog print, and you see the 3 lobes on the mountain lion. And then you can also see the leading toe on that mountain lion foot, whereas the domestic dogs, those inner 2 toes are pretty parallel. Okay. Canine or feline scat, typically, if it's intact, is just going to be straight with blunted end. But usually, when you find it, and even if it's in a segment, you can break that so it breaks into segments. So you can see on the far right, you can see the segmentation there. And then the little piece at the bottom has got segmentation. So that's one way that can help you distinguish, is this coyote or feline. And then if you step on mountain or a feline scat, it will break open, but there won't be a lot of fur in it. It's just like a powder, kind of a bone meal kind of thing. And if it's dry enough, you'll get a little puff. So that's another thing that you can do. Yeah.
I've been told that often for bobcat and mountain lion scat, it will appear white.
Yes.
And I've been told that is because it's a protein meal. Is that correct?
I have heard that too. I will say that more often than not, when I find feline scat, bobcat, mountain lion, it tends to be more white than canines.
Yeah.
But I've also found mountain lion scat that isn't white. So,
Okay.
okay, so let's go quickly because we're starting to run over on time. So rabbit tracks. So rabbits have the middle track that has the roof below it. That's the front foot. So front feet have 5 toes on them. There's the number 5 toe, which is the bottom rightmost indentation. Sometimes it doesn't show, but hind feet are going to be much more pointed than rear feet. It's going to have, if you kind of just follow the toes around on that front foot, because they're offset, gives you kind of a fish hook shape. That's a clue. The hind feet, which are the top ones in the leftmost photos, are 4 toes. And their toes tend to be a little bit more even, so even if you don't see that longer part of the arm on the hind foot, then having a more rounded, wide appearance. So raccoons, easy thing about raccoons, 5 toes on each foot. If it looks like a baby's hand, that's the front. It's more asymmetrical than the hind. If it sort of looks like a little foot, it's probably what else do I want to show? Okay. So this photo I like because it's got 2 purposes. One, it's got a cute factor. The other thing, if you look at the hind feet, that is a great example of what you'll see in the track. One is it will have that, what we call an opposable thumb that can sort of move a lot more than the ours can. But it also shows you've got that thumb, you've got the number 5 toe, and you've got 3 toes close together in the middle. And it shows up that way in the track. On the left, you see the thumb on the hind track, and then the front track above it. If you see a track, you start and you try to count tracks, and you're up anywhere between the 7 and 10 toes. If it's not a sloth, then it's got to be a possum. And that's just where the 2 tracks come down on top of each other. Okay, bighorn sheep, mule deer, they're hooked. Generally have that kind of, some people call it a heart shape. The difference is that if you look at the mule deer, where their outside hoof comes down, it tends to be a little bit sharper edge. You look at the bighorn sheep, which are the ones on the right, it's a lot more outward. So it's almost like if you took a deer track and kind of smushed it, and the sides bent out and the tops flattened out. Scat is pretty much the same, just a little. I can't even think of a candy.
Like a coffee bean.
Yeah, kind of like a coffee bean. Bighorn sheep tend to be a little bit more blunt and oblong. Skunks, two types of skunks, spotted and striped. The thing I want to point out here just real quick is the two don't have the same track configurations. If you look at striped skunk, it's got a single heel pad on the front foot, which is the gray colored one. And then it's got a single metatarsal pad, and then a crease, and then there's a heel pad. But they're solid things. Spotted skunk tracks are smaller, but they've got multiple heel pads. So that's one way you can tell spotted skunk. Okay, so let's just go through this real quick. So you can look at walk, trots, lopes, and gallops. This is generally going from walk to gallop is an increase in speed. So, and there are particular gaits that go from this and the way. But generally, as you pick up speed, tracks get farther apart and they get wider. So another takeaway from this is we were talking about interpretation. Certain animals use certain gaits which leave certain track patterns because of their conservation of energy. So bobcats, coyotes, they generally walk. Foxes, coyotes, and voles, believe it or not, trot. So anytime an animal deviates from their normal walking gait, so think of their quote-unquote normal gait being the way they generally move. They're not necessarily, they're just going from one place to another. They're not in a hurry. Nothing is alarming it. But when you start seeing variations, then you can start thinking, well, why wasn't this bobcat walking? It was in a trot, so it was in a hurry for some reason. Then you start looking for them. Squirrel bound patterns, just two. You see this with squirrels and rabbits. The hind feet, kind of like a Y, hind feet in the back, front there. Then, you find things where you go, this is out of the norm, when you start asking questions. The photo on the left are red fox tracks left in a light dusting of snow on grass from the East Coast. So if you go back and you look at that track pattern, that's not a trot, that's a look. So for some reason, it changed its gait because it was in a trot earlier. It changed its gait. Could have been because the cars going down the street bothered it. Could have seen the chipmunk. This other one is a bobcat. Circles are bobcat tracks, but they're direct registers, but they're really distorted. And then you go, well, what's that thing in the middle? And so when I found this, when I first saw it, I backtracked it for a ways. and I found where the bobcat came out of a grassy, brushy area. And so then I went up, and I noticed a lot of rabbit scat in that area. Then I looked closely right in the middle of that track, and you can see 2 drag marks. So I'm pretty confident that this rabbit, or this bobcat got a rabbit and grabbed it by the scruff of its neck to carry it, and it ended up going up, I don't know how many, 10, 20 more yards, and then cut into a bunch of really dense brush. So it was probably taking this rabbit, dragging it back to its den. Okay, so this, and I'm almost done. So we have a process we go through when we collect our data, and I use a sort of a system, well, I won't talk about cameras, but we have spots laid out that are what we call a transect, a kilometer long, typically divided into anywhere between 3 to 5 equal segments. All of our transect leaders, I would say the bulk of our transect leaders are certified at middle to high level of tracking certification. We have a protocol that we use for how we collect the data. We've had biologists, state regulators do that. So here's just some of the places that we have those tracking sign locations. So we have 27 active transects. Here's where those transects are in multiple areas. So those are kind of what our target species are for data collection. We still use paper and pencil to record data because it's just technology moves too fast for a small organization like us to keep up with. And transect leaders like this because it's flip through screens. But the top part is where we record by section of the transect what type of species we've seen, was that evidence, was it track scats or whatever. And then we keep track of where there are rodents and then how much it's being used. That gets put into a database. We run script to the database, it puts that into Excel file. And then we can do things like, if we want to know how many different species certain transects have identified, we can do a species richness graph. And then from that, we can do deeper dives. And a lot of times we look at choke points and we want to see what's moving in those narrow portions, so we can come up with assessments like that. I started doing species accumulation curves primarily for the camera work that I'm doing, but it works for track and sign because it tells you kind of the rate at which you're approaching that 20 species in terms of what you've detected. And it gives you an idea, like this one, it's been stuck at 14 species since, I think that's 2011. So that doesn't mean that you say, I'm not going to monitor this anymore. It just means, okay, now keep an eye on it and still collect the future data. And then we can look at species observations and do some comparisons either by year, by quarter, by section. So there's some of the things where our data has been used to make planning decisions. It's not that we did this, but other people used our data to do these. That's it. So